And welcome to the 30th meeting in 2012 of the Health and Sport Committee. And as usual, can I remind everyone present that mobile phones and Blackberries should be switched off, as they often interfere with the sound system. Our first item on the agenda today is a decision on whether to take two items in private. The first item, which is item 5 on the agenda, which is the committee's approach to the next phase of the work on access to new medicines. Can I have the committee's agreement to take that item in private today? Thank you. The second item for our consideration is our ongoing work and consideration of our draft report on the Scottish Government's draft budget 2013-14. And can I have the committee's agreement to take consideration of its budget report in private at future meetings? Thank you. We now move to item 2 on the agenda, which is to take evidence on draft Glasgow Commonwealth Games Act 2008 ticket touting offence exceptions for use of internet, etc. Scotland Regulations 2012. And can I welcome Shona Robertson, Minister for Commonwealth Games and Sport; Odette Burgess, Senior Policy Officer, Commonwealth Games Delivery Team; and Mark Egling, Solicitor, Scottish Government. Welcome to you all. And can I invite the Minister to make some opening remarks before we invite questions from the committee?
Thanks very much, Convener. We're here today to consider the draft Glasgow Commonwealth Games Act 2008 ticket touting offence, exceptions for use of internet, etc. Scotland Regulations 2012. As part of Glasgow's bid to host the 2014 Games, the Scottish Government agreed to take steps to prevent the touting of Games tickets. Provisions in the Glasgow Commonwealth Games Act 2008 will, when they come into force on the 29th of November 2012, achieve this by making it an offence for an unauthorised person to sell, offer to sell, expose for sale, advertise, make available or give away a Games ticket in a public space for an amount exceeding the ticket's face value or with a view to making a profit. This is known as the touting offence. These regulations specify circumstances in which making facilities available in connection with electronic communications or the storage of data is or is not capable of constituting the touting offence. They also ensure compliance with an EU directive on electronic commerce. In particular, the regulations set out when the mere conduit, caching or hosting will not constitute the offence. These are the mechanisms used by internet providers for online temporary display of and or storage of information. The regulations also set out conditions that must be met before the offence can be enforced against a person based in another EEA state who provides internet-type services. The absence of further provision would give rise to a risk that the touting offence would be enforced incompatibly with the requirements of the EU directive. The draft regulations before the committee are therefore very much a technical measure to comply with EU law. Scottish Government officials have worked closely with the Games partners on the proposals for the regulations. UK Government officials and officials from other devolved administrations were consulted separately on similar provisions, which were extended to the whole of the UK through the making of a Section 104 order under the Scotland Act 1998. Comments on the draft order resulted in changes to make the meaning clearer, and these refinements are reflected in these regulations. A public consultation on the draft regulations took place earlier this year. More than 60 agencies and businesses were contacted about the consultation, including the industry representative organisation and a number of businesses within the internet ticketing industry. 2 responses to the consultation were received, and these both supported the regulations. Convener, I'm happy to take any questions before we get round to
Thank you, Minister.
moving the motion.
Do we have any questions from the committee members? Richard Simpson.
Yes, can I ask what we've learnt from the Olympic Games in terms of the way in which we've set these regulations up? Have there been any lessons that have had to be learnt?
Well, a lot of the regulations follow quite closely those that were brought forward for the Olympic Games. On the general ticketing strategy, you can imagine that a lot of lessons will have been learned around the sale of those tickets. But yes, I mean, a lot of very detailed information was gathered around ticketing. And as I say, the regulations brought forward mirror quite closely those that were brought forward for the Olympic and Paralympic Games.
Was there in fact much in the way of ticket touting in Olympic
There were
Games?
some cases and some prosecutions. I don't know if you want to say a little bit more about that in terms of prosecution.
I can't add much to what the Minister says, other than I believe there were several hundred instances involving ticket touting which were investigated or considered for the London Olympics. I don't know how many of those related to offences in Scotland, but that's the sort of ballpark.
Smith.
Convener, if you'll permit a wider question around the issue of ticketing. I mean, one of the things we've seen at the Games in London was, the use of one provider for credit card transactions and that sort of thing. Can you give us any indication of when those decisions are likely to be made in relation to Glasgow, and do you envisage a similar approach being taken?
Well,
essentially, I suppose, Minister, I'm asking if the London Games has been used as a model for the strategy, and I apologise for interrupting you.
The OC are in the process just now of procuring a ticketing agent who's going to provide the software to manage the ticket sales for all of the games. There are no plans for restrictions around credit card provider because we know that that was an issue, not just in the purchase of tickets but also merchandising as well. So as I understand it, the OC has no plans to replicate that. The other thing to say about tickets that will be different is that the purchase of tickets for the Commonwealth Games won't just be restricted to the internet. The initial sale of tickets will be on the internet, but then there'll be provision through a call centre and also some walk-in over-the-counter venue ticket booths, so a sort of box office style, which I think is very good because it means that people can pay for tickets with cash, and obviously the ticket prices will be substantially lower than those average prices for the Olympics. So I think on a number of fronts it's fair to say that the availability and access to tickets will be easier than perhaps was the case for the Olympics.
Convener, if I can, I think the Minister is trying to be as helpful as possible in giving us information that a lot of us haven't yet seen. Are you aware yet whether we know that there will be tickets available for specific events, that people will be able to choose exactly what they want to go to rather than the kind of ballot system that was operational in London yet?
Well, there will have to be the management around oversubscription for ticket sales for a particular event and venue, and that will all be managed. It's difficult to be too precise given that the ticketing agent hasn't been appointed as yet, but it's fair to say that a lot of these discussions are ongoing, and it's really about making it as easy as possible for people to get tickets. They might not get the tickets for the number one event that they want, but it's then about making sure that the communication with people is as good as can be. And I think there were some issues around the Olympic tickets when people kept going back onto the internet to try and get tickets and then were unsuccessful again. I think there was a bit of frustration there. You can be assured that a lot of the discussion around the ticketing strategy is aimed to try and avoid some of that frustration around ticket purchase.
Are there any further questions? Yeah. Any other members before I invite Richard back in? No? Richard then, thanks.
One of the problems with the ticketing in London was the allocation of tickets to the organisers or the organising committees in each country, and them then not using those tickets appropriately. Is that something that you know whether that's being looked at, or is there a completely different system for the Commonwealth Games?
All of those matters will be looked at. It is difficult because clearly the Commonwealth Games Federation and the associations within each of those countries will want to have tickets. So those discussions are ongoing, but we can certainly provide you with more detail once all of that is worked out in more detail, if that would be helpful.
Thank you.
No other questions? Can I thank the Minister and the officials at that point for their statement and obviously the answers provided and the offer of further information. We now move to agenda item number 3. We now move to agenda item number 3, which is a formal debate on the affirmative SSI, on which we have just taken evidence. And I remind members that under Standing Order Rule 10.6.3, the committee has up to 90 minutes for debate. The time for questions to the Minister has passed. This is a formal debate on the merits of the order, and of course officials, as they know, can't speak in this debate. I invite the Minister to move the motion.
Okay, I move that this committee accept the motion to approve the Glasgow Commonwealth Games Act 2008 ticket touting offence, exceptions for the use of internet, etc. Scotland Regulations 2012 draft be approved.
Thank you. I invite committee members to speak on the merits of the order. Are there any committee members? No. Then I put the question that on S4M 04636 that the Health and Sport Committee recommends that the Glasgow Commonwealth Games Act 2008 ticket touting offence, exceptions for the use of internet, etc., Scotland Regulations 2012 be approved. Are we all agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Thank you, Minister, and your team. Thank you very much. We'll just suspend for a moment while we... We now move to agenda item number 4, which is petition PE 1384, which is consideration of the committee's approach to petition by Kim Hartley, which has been referred to the committee. The committee members have had papers on this matter. Do any of the members wish to speak to those papers or suggest a way forward for the committee? Mark MacDonald.
Thank you, Convener, and having come here from the Public Petitions Committee, I'm familiar with the petition. I note the paper from the clerks and the recommendation contained within. I would suggest that rather than close the petition at this stage, that we perhaps write to the Scottish Government seeking clarification from the Scottish Government around where they feel the petitioner's aims have been addressed within current government policies and strategies. Once we receive that response, I think we should then give consideration to how we want to approach the issue that's raised within the petition, if we want to do it in its most general sense or if we want to do something more targeted.
Thank you, Mark. Are there any other members? Nanette, I see, and then yes, Richard.
Convener, the petitioner still has some concerns. Although pleased about the sort of delivery plan that the government has come forward with, but there are still some concerns, particularly about the waiting list for, or waiting time for children, which is up to 27 weeks, the maximum of 81 weeks, and for adults as well. They are noticing an effect from budget reductions on the provision of speech and language therapy, and there is a concern about projected staff changes. So I think there are still issues that we could perhaps pursue with government, and like Mark MacDonald, I would suggest that we keep the petition open at this point in time, particularly to pursue with government how they're providing the quality of services for speech and language therapy.
Richard Simpson.
Yes, I would agree with both my colleagues here and with Mark and Nanette. Sorry, we're in private session, aren't we? With Mark and Nanette. First. Are we still public? Oh, right, no, that's fine. In that case, agree with my colleagues. Make it formal.
It's okay.
I think one of the issues that interests me is the fact that the speech and language therapy is not just funded by the health service, but is also funded by the local authorities, who are being subject to really very substantial squeezes, which I think they are passing on. I recently visited with SNP colleagues the speech and language therapy in Glasgow, which has been completely redesigned and reorganised, and they've managed to get waiting times down, but also costs down. So, and that seems to be something that the local professionals seem to be regarding as being appropriate. So there is a model out there that is working effectively. So I think that we need to also ask COSLA, who, are, as far as I know, haven't given evidence to the Petitions Committee, but if they have, then we could perhaps have a look at that. I wonder if we could also get a fuller summary of the evidence that's been given so far to the Petitions Committee, so that we can take a look at that. But I entirely agree with Mark MacDonald that we should, at this point, write to the government and ask where the speech and language therapy fits into the new targets for the allied health professionals. And one final comment, I think that whilst 18 weeks might be appropriate for an adult, although I suspect it's probably not, because if you had a stroke, for example, then to wait 18 weeks after that stroke, you're already into a treatment process. So there shouldn't be a further waiting time before you actually get into rehabilitation. And the Stroke Association has been very concerned about the fact that whilst the immediate rehabilitation systems are now good, that the government has done well in terms of moving forward to rapid admission of people with stroke to the appropriate specialist stroke unit. The area that we're still failing on very substantially is the post-immediate rehabilitation phase, and that is often does involve speech and language issues, particularly swallowing difficulties in this respect, and that's a major area which can give concern. And then finally, I think the question of children, I think it really is not appropriate to have even an 18-week waiting time for children. I think that the delays to referral that we heard in this committee from the professor from Queen Margaret University in the last session, which was that the referrals, for example, from health visitors had moved the average age of referral up from just under 3 to over 4, means that in the preschool phase there is a really serious problem. If there's then a waiting time of 27 weeks, I think the letter from Kim Hartley says up to 27 weeks, a maximum of 81 weeks, then that 27 to 81 weeks waiting at that point when you're going into a preschool situation means these children are then entering school with serious drawbacks facing them. So I think that we need to have a thorough look at it, and these are some of the issues I think we need to go into a great deal more detail on, but initially we should try and get a response from the government to some of these issues.
Are there any other members wishing to say anything? I think we've got consensus at least on, to keep the petition open, seek further information in taking it. I think the email that members received yesterday, unfortunately, wasn't received by the clerks, but they maybe take some of that into account. We don't prejudge anything at this stage. We give the government an opportunity to consider the position, respond to us, and then we will further consider what action, if any, that we take at that point. Mark?
Also, just to add, Convener, I think Richard Simpson made a number of good suggestions around writing to COSLA, but the other thing which I think would be helpful, I'm aware that we can click through the links to get access to information around the petition, but maybe getting hard copies of the evidence that was received by the Petitions Committee would be helpful, and maybe including that in the next mailing to members.
Okay. That helpful? Yeah. We agree then that we proceed on that basis, as summarised by Mark. Right, good, thank you. We now move to agenda.
Close the public part of the meeting, going to private now.
We now move to agenda number 5.
We have to close the meeting first because we're still in public.
Oh, we now have to close the meeting. I was going to say that we now move to agenda number 5, which we previously agreed would be taken in private, and we now, close the meeting at this point, the public sector.